So first, do you agree with that assessment that since 1971, we've obviously had this exploding debt, and that's for the worse, and that these interest rates have become much more unstable than they were maybe in the previously? And does that matter to investors? Or is this just kind of, oh yeah, well, we used to be on gold and now we're on paper and things change and no, Ben, you weird gold bug, you just like things the way they used to be. So does that matter at all, the way the economy's changed since 1971? Or is that just kind of a fun historical tidbit? Oh yeah, we used to be on a gold standard. Anyways, back to work.
Yeah, I think if you look through the history of monetary regimes, there has and not just in the U.S. context, but if you look at, for instance, the history of Chinese monetary regimes over hundreds of years, or monetary regimes that had existed in Europe, etc. What you see is you often see fluctuations from moving from hard money regimes like gold standards or specie backed money in one way, shape, or form that eventually, in one form or another, is devalued, whether it be through like cutting coins or reducing the weight of the hard money in the coins or various other measures, the introduction of alternative lower quality monies that essentially devalues the previous money. And then eventually you get to sort of the fiat world. And the fiat world feels good, feels better, more effective, because what it allows you to do from a central authority's perspective is that you have the ability essentially to control, to have more control over the money supply in the economy, and presumably as a function of that, more control over stimulating or tightening conditions. The big challenge with that is that there's always a incentive to for the private sector to borrow more in that currency, and for the public authorities to continue to stimulate until the point in which you get that stimulation that creates sufficient instability and concern about the money, which then, uh, you know, sort of practically feeling is like inflation's too high in economies, and then that creates a reactionary force, whether to either instill limitations of that fiat management or to move back to hard money. Like that's a very typical cycle that we've seen play out over and over again, and the U.S. context is not that much different. I think, in several ways, the U.S. fiat system was on the precipice of not working, given the elevated inflation in the 70s, and it took, frankly, quite a stern central authority to enforce that the dollar would preserve its value relative to stuff. And that was, you go back and study that period, it now looks from our perspective like that was how it was going to play out all along. That Volcker was going to get it done, and we were going to have tight money, and the dollar would survive. I would say if you look back through time, it was certainly it was less certain. Even Volcker would say it was less certain at the time than I think people gave it credit for. But that ushered in, for a variety of different reasons, global reasons, global disinflationary impulses and global integration, a big disinflationary wave that has largely ended. And as part of that disinflationary wave, interest rates came down, people could borrow more, their debt service would look consistent, even though they were borrowing more. The challenge that we have now is we're coming back to one of those instances, whether you look at a combination of fiscal behavior here in the U.S. and I can use the U.S. as an example, but it's kind of true across most of the developed world. Fiscal behavior that where we're running deficits that are wartime like deficits at a time when unemployment is at 75-year lows, or on the monetary policy side where to put it bluntly, like the Fed has not met its mandate on the inflation side for several years and projects to not meet it for several more years. I don't know about you. If I had failed at doing my job for 5 years, I should hope that someone would throw me out rather than let me just carry on with the existing approach. And I think those are the types of dynamics that sow the seeds for the reversal of interest and understanding of fiat currency relative to specie in one form or another. And I think, we're starting to see the nascent pressures related to that. The real question is, on the fiscal side and the monetary side, is the U.S. and other developed world countries, are they going to, tighten the belt the way that is necessary in order to preserve the value of that relative to stuff in particular? Or are they going to let the desire, the, the good feeling of the immediate gratification of additional stimulus continue to persist, which undermines the dollar and other, developed fiat currencies in terms of their long-term success?